अस्सलाम वालेकुम एवरीवन. सो आई थिंक अभी काफ़ी लोगों ने ज्वाइन कर दिया है, तो लेट्स स्टार्ट ऑफ. सो आज का वी विल हैव इट अ बिट narrower. We will have more of a discussion on current affairs and Pak affairs in particular, and then general question and answer sessions भी इसके साथ साथ चलते रहेंगे. Before we start off properly, a bit of an introduction for myself. उन लोगों के लिए जो लोग last time नहीं थे. My name is Abdul Sami Sheikh. I'm a part of the 50th Common CTP जो कि इस साल start होने वाली है. We passed the exam and gave the exam in 2021, and I've been allocated in the Pakistan Administrative Service. Before giving the CSS exam, I had my bachelor's in accounting and finance from IBA, and I'd done my CF level 1 as well. But then, obviously, as life goes, आपका track थोड़ा सा change हो जाता है, and I've landed here right now. Now I'll just give the floor over to Amir, and then Amir will introduce himself, and then we'll continue.
Assalamu alaikum everyone. I hope everyone's well. My name is Mohammad Amir Hamza Bullo, and just like Sami, I gave my CSS exam in 2021, and I got allocated to the Pakistan Administrative Service as part of the 50th Common. Before the CSS exam itself, I did my bachelor's in law from King's College London, and I was called to be a barrister at the Honourable Society of Lincoln's Inn. However, before commencing my job as a barrister, we were hit with a global pandemic. And upon being hit, I had to return back on a 2-day basis. And in August and September, when the Delta variant was at its high, I thought about spending my time in a more purposeful manner, and I decided to give CSS. And alhamdulillah, I got allocated into PAS in my first attempt. This session will focus on, like Sami said before me, Pakistan Pakistan affairs and current affairs, and this will be this will focus on more niche topics like the way you can attempt both the papers, the expected topics, and how we can approach the exam as a beginner who's just starting off preparation, or as an individual who is giving it in 2023. So I'll give the floor to Sami to start us off, and and then we'll look forward to hearing your questions and answering them as well as possible.
Thank you so much, Amir. तो basically the problem is कुछ टाइम पहले हम लोगों ने एक चीज़ realize की थी कि Pak affairs and current affairs are the sort of subjects जिनको don't know what the issue with exactly. या तो लोग बहुत ज़्यादा हल्का ले रहे होते हैं because उनके marks जो है वो क्लबों के काउंट हो रहे हैं as a part of GK, या फिर पीपल थिंक कि उनका बैकग्राउंड अगर इस चीज़ के अंदर है ऑलरेडी तो मे बी उनको बहुत ज़्यादा पढ़ने की ज़रूरत नहीं है इस चीज़ को. सो पीपल टेक इट अ लॉट लाइटर. वो लोग ऐसे पे ज़्यादा प्रेसी पे ज़्यादा फोकस करते हैं. दैट्स नॉट टू से कि उन पे नहीं फोकस करना चाहिए, बट दीज टू सब्जेक्ट्स आर ऑफ पैरामाउंट इम्पोर्टेंस. तो इसके अंदर इट्स नॉट जस्ट इनफ टू नो कि सिलेबस के अंदर क्या क्या चीज़ आ रही हैं या आपने मेजर इवेंट्स कवर कर लिए हैं या नहीं किए. द मोस्ट क्रिटिकल एलिमेंट हियर इज हाउ टू एक्चुअली गो अबाउट स्टडीइंग इट, जिस तरीके से आप आंसर डिलीवर करने में इसको बेहतर कवर कर सकें. सो टू स्टार्ट ऑफ विथ करंट अफेयर्स के कुछ टॉपिक्स हैं दैट आई वुड लाइक टू डिस्कस हियर राइट नाउ, एंड देन ट्राई टू एक्सप्लेन कि इनको आप बेसिकली आपको कवर किस तरीके से करना है. सो फॉर एग्जाम्पल अ मेजर इंसिडेंट जो कि नॉट एन इंसिडेंट इवेंट, सेट ऑफ इवेंट्स जो कि लास्ट ईयर में अकर हुए थे, दैट वाज अ यूएस विड्रॉल फ्रॉम अफगानिस्तान. अभी लोगों को ये अंदाज़ा होता है चलें एक मेजर इवेंट आ गया, हम लोगों ने इवेंट कवर कर लिया क्योंकि हम लोगों ने लेट्स से आर्टिकल्स पढ़ लिए हैं, 5 आर्टिकल्स पढ़ लिए हैं हम लोगों ने, न्यूज़पेपर आर्टिकल्स हम लोग रोज़ अखबार पढ़ रहे होते हैं, सो वी कवर देम विद सम रेगुलरिटी. दैट्स इनफ फॉर अस. That is not enough in my opinion, because whenever I'm thinking about a current affairs topic, and this is how I covered it for the exam as well, आपको उसको कुछ हिस्सों के अंदर तोड़ना पड़ता है. बिकॉज एग्जाम में आपको नहीं पता कि एग्जामिनर आपको क्वेश्चन देगा, अगर कोई इशू डिस्कस कर भी रहा है तो किस एंगल से कर रहा है. तो फॉर एग्जाम्पल यही आपको यूएस विड्रॉल फ्रॉम अफगानिस्तान का इशू आ जाता है. You can give you that issue in the context of how that is going to affect Pakistan, or how that is going to be affecting the regional security and stability in South Asia. They can talk to you about in the context of the global power dynamic between the US and China and Russia. They can give it to you in the sense of a humanitarian context. अफगानिस्तान के अंदर जो है इस वक्त जो मसले चल रहे हैं उससे अफगानी लोगों पे क्या फ़र्क पड़ेगा? How will they be impacted? Is that a humanitarian crisis? How is that being created and how is that potentially going to be solved? So for that, you need to go a bit in depth into these crises as well. It's not enough कि आपने day to day इन चीज़ों को cover किया हुआ है. You have to understand background context क्या है उस चीज़ का. So background context के अंदर you need to understand historical context क्या क्या आ रहा है किसी भी issue के हिसाब से. For Afghanistan, I would believe that it's not just enough कि आप US invasion जहाँ से start हुआ है वहाँ तक चले जाएं. You have to go a bit further back. You have to go at the very least to the start of the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan and how that created a destabilizing element not just in the country but in the entire region जो कि बढ़ता गया went on to the 90s with the creation of the Taliban, their takeover of the country, how that then culminated in the 9/11 attacks and then the US invasion and on and on. तो एक तो आपका कॉन्टेक्स्ट हिस्टोरिकल समझना बहुत ज़रूरी है फॉर एनी मेजर क्राइसिस. फॉर एग्जाम्पल अभी ये अफगानिस्तान की बात कर ली. लास्ट ईयर का एक बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट क्वेश्चन था, बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट इवेंट था. दैट वाज द नगोर्नो काराबाग में जो मसले चल रहे थे उस वक्त. नाउ नगोर्नो काराबाग समझने के लिए इट्स नॉट इनफ कि आपने सिर्फ अजरबैजान और आर्मीनिया का 2019 का स्टेट ऑफ अफेयर देख लिया, 2020 का देख लिया. दैट्स नॉट इनफ. यू नीड टू अंडरस्टैंड कि हिस्टोरिकली उनके क्या क्या मसले रहे हैं, क्यों रहे हैं, not just at the time जहाँ पे both countries became independent, but even before that as well when they were both part of the USSR as well. So historical context is a very critically important part of any current affairs as well as Pak affairs issue, but particularly for current affairs. Because when you're starting off your topic, जो आपको angle दे रहा है, usually in any current affair incident या कोई war type का incident होता है, उसके अंदर you need to drag it back and give a bit of historical context ताकि आप set up कर सकें उस सवाल को currently हम लोग उस situation को किस तरीके से link कर रहे हैं with its historical roots, right? Again, as an example, that is true for what's happening in Russia and Ukraine right now. Now, Russia and Ukraine के अंदर लोग बोलेंगे that is about NATO membership right now. Sure, NATO membership does play a role. लेकिन when I'm thinking about this issue, I'm not thinking about this issue only post 2014 or post 2008. I'm thinking about it in the 1910s and I'm thinking about it in the 1700s. Okay, for example, when the Russian Empire was created, so the Russian Empire's initial name was Kievian Rus. And Kievian Rus, mere Kiev hai, that comes from Ukraine. So the actual roots of Russia in itself come from Kiev, which means this is not just an issue of territory. This is not just an issue of access to the Black Sea. This is a sentimental and this is a historical issue जो कि आपको उस तरीके से उस एंगल से इस चीज को अटैच करने की जरूरत है. I hope everyone's following me on this so far. The point again, what I'm trying to make is historical context for any issue is extremely important, and that is something that most people miss. उनको के सवाल मिल जाएगा कि how has the US role in Afghanistan impacted the security situation in South Asia? और वो directly चले जाएंगे इंडिया पे, पाकिस्तान पे, चाइना पे, रशिया पे. No, it's important to give a bit of context ताकि एग्जामिनर को भी समझ में आए कि आप इस सिचुएशन के रूट कॉजेस को समझ सकते हैं जो कि आज के नहीं है, वो 20, 30, 50, 100 साल पहले के हैं. Amir, I'm sure, would like to add something to this.
Yeah, so very well pointed out by Sami about the topics in current affairs. Current affairs, जो एक paper है, it's a lot more diverse as compared to Pakistan affairs because current affairs के अंदर आपको हमेशा एक topic का global perspective लेना होगा. Just to present you guys with a topic, say Afghanistan again. Now, Afghanistan coming in a Pakistan affairs paper and Afghanistan coming in a current affairs paper means that you have to take two different approaches. Now, what are those approaches? For a current affairs paper, you have to look at it from a global perspective. From a perspective that is perhaps not only limited to Afghanistan, that is not only limited to its neighbors, that is not only limited to the region, the South Asian region, not even limited to the whole Asiatic continent as a whole. It's restricted and can go as extensively as a global perspective. Afghanistan का globe पे क्या issue हुआ. And that is why current affairs के जो सवालात होते हैं उनमें आपको एक holistic perspective ज़रूर देना होता है. Holistic perspective as in, like I mentioned, Afghanistan, the neighbors, the region, the continent, and then the globe. अब आपको अगर पाकिस्तान affairs के अंदर यही सवाल आता है Afghanistan का, then you have to be a lot more restricted. They're asking you about Afghanistan in relation to a Pakistan affairs question. So you have to talk about the impacts on Pakistan. So let's just say if the question being asked is, what are the impacts of the US withdrawal from Afghanistan and that is in a Pakistan Affairs paper, you will talk about the direct impact that it has on the Afghani people and Pakistan, and why Pakistan's role in Afghanistan and supporting the Taliban government might sever its relations with countries such as India, US, the UK, and predominantly what are often known as the Quad countries. So when you're talking about it from a Pakistan affairs perspective, you have to be very limited. But when you're talking about it from a current affairs perspective, you have to be a lot more holistic and not niche at all. Sami can carry on with the current affairs lecture.
Thank you so much, Amir. So another point that Amir made here is about multiple dimensions. Now that is true for both Pak affairs and current affairs. Pakistan affairs ke andar, as Amir said, you're focusing more on Pakistan side of things. So again, it's not that you will only focus on the Pakistan affairs side of things, but your primary emphasis, your overwhelming emphasis will be that Pakistan पे इसके क्या फर्क पड़ेगा, how Pakistan is going to be linked by this, what Pakistan can do to, for example, mitigate the risks, and how Pakistan can potentially get out of it. Current affairs थोड़ा सा different है, and इसके अंदर आपको multiple dimensions समझने की जरूरत है. Let's say we're talking about Russia and Ukraine again यहाँ पे. तो रशिया एंड यूक्रेन के अंदर आपको समझना है कि कौन कौन से प्लेयर्स हैं अपार्ट फ्रॉम दीज टू कंट्रीज दैट आर इन्वॉल्वड इन दिस क्राइसिस. You're going to think about, okay, so European Union included है. European Union because of the geographic proximity that it has to the conflict, because of the fact that NATO countries mostly EU के अंदर हैं, and how EU can be potentially impacted in terms of trade, in terms of energy, in terms of a potential overblown war जो कि उनके वेस्ट में आ सकती है. You're going to think, okay, US किस तरीके से linked है इसमें? US has economic interests, US has geopolitical interests in this crisis. US wants to, for example, bring Russia down to scale. It wants to reduce any possible domination that Russia may have over its neighbors. It's trying to ensure that the globalization space in which all countries are significantly interdependent on each other वो आराम आराम से कम हो जाए, and to make sure that Russia and China, for example, cannot create a bulwark against US hegemony and supremacy, not just in the region, but in the entire globe. You can think about okay, China का क्या role है इस conflict के अंदर. So there's multiple directions. And आपको हर किसी important player का angle इसके अंदर समझना पड़ेगा in order to accurately present their point of view in the answer that you're making. अगर आप बहुत one dimensional रहेंगे, अगर आपने let's say यूक्रेन एंड रशिया के इंसिडेंट को सिर्फ यूक्रेन एंड रशिया के कॉन्टेक्स्ट में एक्सप्लेन करना शुरू कर दिया, then that is a very narrow perspective. You're not thinking wider. You're only thinking about those two countries. You're not thinking between those two countries के बाहर region में क्या impact आ रहा है, overall आपका let's say over the continent क्या impact आ रहा है, on a global scale क्या impact आ रहा है, on a geostrategic side, on an economic side, on a socio-cultural side, what the other impacts are of this crisis on the entire world and of multiple countries that are involved in the conflict either directly or indirectly. Again, this is more true in current affairs than in Pak affairs. Pak affairs में आपको थोड़ा ज़्यादा emphasis, actually काफी ज़्यादा emphasis देना पड़ता है on how this is going to impact Pakistan in itself and how Pakistan can get out of it. So perspectives का difference है. And again, this is a mistake that I've seen people make. Okay, they try to conflate both things. वो लोग current affairs, Pak affairs में strategy बिल्कुल same रखते हैं. That's not something I would recommend that you do. Amir, please.
So now coming on to Pakistan affairs, which first of all, I just want to highlight that a lot of individuals seem to think कि अगर 120 आ गए हमारे general knowledge के अंदर, we're good to go. I think Sami and I can speak for our entire batch that in saying that the amount of stringent checking that took place this year for Pakistan affairs, current affairs, and general knowledge was unprecedented. We were strict. We were checked so strictly that we have come to terms with the fact that the examiner now expects us to do more. अब जब आप पाकिस्तान अफेयर्स की बात करते हैं, पाकिस्तान अफेयर्स के अंदर there are many topics that you can focus on for this year, and I'd like to present with one of them. हम एक पूरा इसके बाद after this small stint we'll give you a list of topics as well. अब मैं आपको अगर एक चीज बता दूं, अगर आपके पास पाकिस्तान अफेयर्स में सवाल आता है, suppose 18th amendment, अब आप 18th अमेंडमेंट को लिखने के लिए आपको एक बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट चीज ये करनी होगी कि आपको बताना होगा 18th अमेंडमेंट कब आया. It was in April 2010. And what did it focus on? It focused on provincial sovereignty, and it tried to limit the role of center over the provinces because we wanted to create a stronger federation. the federation that our guide had envisioned in 1947 on the 15th of August. अब उसकी वजह से जो मॉडर्न डे डिलेमास हो रहे हैं, जैसा आपको पता है, इसको कहा जाता है सेंट्रल प्रोविंशियल डिसफंक्शनल रिलेशनशिप जो क्रिएट हुई है उसकी वजह से, उसको हमें देखने के लिए हमें बहुत ज्यादा पहलू देखने होते हैं. अब आपको कोई ग्लोबल पर्सपेक्टिव नहीं लेना पाकिस्तान अफेयर्स के अंदर. यू हैव टू बी वेरी पाकिस्तान ओरिएंटेड. कौन कौन से इश्यूज हैं? There's an issue on what is devolved to the provinces and what is devolved to the federation. Now, for example, I currently reside in Karachi. आपने सुना होगा एक बुंदल आइलैंड है. बुंदल आइलैंड, बंदल आइलैंड, जैसे भी आप इसको pronounce करें, it's off of the coast of Karachi, and the federal government says no, that is within the realms of the control of Islamabad. While Sindh says no, that's provincial autonomy, and we can create large projects on it and have bilateral agreements with individuals that are willing to invest. That is one of them. NICVD जो hospital है, the federal government says no, that is within our realms. Sindh says no, that is within our realm. That is one of the issues. The second bigger issue is in response to emergencies. Now, we all lived through the COVID pandemic and especially the first 2 months. कितना बड़ा issue हुआ था. Sindh had a different lockdown, Islamabad had a different lockdown, Punjab and Islamabad were coinciding with their lockdown, Sindh was completely different. Sindh ने partial lockdown किया था, Islamabad ने smart lockdown किया था. कोई एक harmonization of policies नहीं थी. वो क्यों नहीं थी? क्योंकि जो health ministry है वो devolve हो गई है provinces के पास. तो हमारे पास, is there anyone who has the power to perhaps amend a policy that a province has? No. On paper, no. We haven't had any judgment to counter this claim, but no. तो जब आप 18th Amendment की बात करेंगे तो आपको पहले बताना होगा कौन कौन सी चीजें चेंज हुई. सबसे पहले 58(2)(b, the infamous 58(2)(b, which has removed a lot of prime ministers, especially in the 90s, where the president had the power to dissolve the assembly. वो खत्म हो गया. Chief Election Commissioner की जो पोस्ट थी, that was to be the Chief Election Commissioner was to be nominated using the people on the treasury benches and the government and opposition. उसके अलावा आपकी जो first and second list थी of constitution, जिसके अंदर आपको जो ministries and devolved to the center and province, उनके बीच bifurcation आ गई थी और बहुत ज़्यादा subjects devolve हो गए थे provinces को. उसके अलावा आपका NFC award, जो it gives a certain amount of revenue to each province, जिसका I think जो threshold है 58% to the provinces and 42% to the center. That was decided in 2010. उसके अलावा आपका जो Council of Common Interest बना था, Council of Common Interest, जिसके अंदर any issue relating to inter-provincial coordination वहाँ पे solve होना था. ये भी was part of 18th Amendment. जब आप ये डिस्कस करेंगे, आप पहले ये प्रेजेंट करेंगे कि ये चीजें 18th Amendment में हमने we pass them as law by a 2/3 majority. अब issues क्या हैं? Issue जैसे मैंने आपको बताया, कौन सा subject किसका है. CCI की meetings जो I believe biannually होनी थी, they don't happen for 2 years, 3 years at a stretch. Inter-provincial coordination के अंदर coordination नहीं, लेकिन inter-provincial discord हो गया है. Dysfunctional relationship हो गई आपकी. Emergency powers के अंदर provinces are going the separate way and the government's going the center is going the separate way. अब आप फिर ये बताएंगे कि जो ये इतने मसले मसाइल हैं, जो I'm summarizing it for you, इनको हम कैसे solve कर सकते हैं? अब इनके बहुत तरीके हैं solve करने के, लेकिन the easiest way to solve these issues is by going to the parliament, having debates. हमने अपना जो पार्लियामान है, that is used across the world to have a healthy discussion and then come to a fruitful conclusion that is acceptable to all parties. But we have seen over a period of time that it has been used as a method to gain political points instead of taking all stakeholders across the board on board. तो आप कहेंगे political जो dialogue है आपका वो parliamentary debate से बेहतर हो. Council of Common Interest को आप यूटिलाइज करें, जहाँ पे प्राइम मिनिस्टरशिप शेयर करते हैं, प्राइम मिनिस्टर उस मीटिंग को चेयर करते हैं और आपके जो चीफ मिनिस्टर्स होते हैं वो मेंबर्स होते हैं, आप उसको यूटिलाइज करें. उसके अलावा जो इमरजेंसी पावर्स हैं उस पे कोई एक कमीशन बननी चाहिए जहाँ पे एक कंसेंसस मीट हो in the case a pandemic or an epidemic happens. Or now that we have seen that pandemics and epidemics and biological wars and food crises, food security issues, water security issues are on such a high that if we don't use CCI, we are left with a divergent set of policies between the center and the province. और जब आप इन चीज़ों पे concentrate करेंगे, for example, to attempt an 18th Amendment question, उससे examiner को क्या पता चलेगा कि A, you know when the 18th Amendment took place. B, you know what the 18th Amendment was about. C, you know what the issues in the 18th Amendment are. And D, for your critical analysis, you know how to solve these issues using pre-existing institutions that are present in our country. उससे आपका आंसर बहुत बेहतर होगा and the examiner would be a lot more amenable to giving you more marks because you've covered all dimensions. अब इसके बाद, I believe Sami should give the list of current affairs topics. I will give a list of Pakistan affairs topics after that, and we will stick to questions after this, and then we'll have a short discussion on answer attempting techniques, followed by a general Q&A.
Okay. Thank you so much, Amir. So for current affairs topics in particular, मेरे हिसाब से it's very important that we don't restrict ourselves to particular dimensions. Again, answer आपको कभी भी question इस तरीके से phrase नहीं होगा कि Pakistan relationship with India discuss. They don't give it that open-ended. वो लोग आपको इतना ज़्यादा leverage भी नहीं देते हैं. What they do is they give you a particular angle. कि इस angle से associate करके आप इस वाले मसले को discuss करें. So again, let's say Afghanistan वाली चीज़ थी. So Afghanistan issue in relation with geo security, right? So if you're getting a question like that, उसके लिए you need to understand the overall broader issue in a lot of detail. So we've listed them down, these issues. We'll be sharing them later in an hour or so after this space as well. But the issues that we've listed down to are A, AUKUS and Quad, which again are, they have a lot of similarities and parallels. So कोई भी आपको एक answer particularly, it's rare कि आपको AUKUS या Quad के बारे में दे, but again, even if they give you a question about one of these in particular, it's going to be very important for you to link the other one to it as well. So in those issues के लिए, people need to do particular research, go and read up on historical context in दोनों का क्या था, when it was created, who the current members are, why it was created, what its current actions that it's taken are, particularly, for example, if you're looking at AUKUS, you're going to be looking at the nuclear deal that was signed between the US and Australia. You're going to look at potential impact and repercussions about what impact that had in Australia and the United States' relationship with France, which had a pre-existing nuclear submarine deal with Australia. And then you're going to look at what the state of affairs is going to be in the future, right? How security is going to be maintained in the Indian Ocean, how security is going to be maintained in the South China Sea. Will these treaties or will these deals have a conclusion or have a result that the participating members want out of it, or will they fail in their goals, and why? Right? So you need to understand historical context, you need to understand current state of affairs, you need to understand what the future repercussions are, and then obviously back that up with facts and figures. We'll discuss this a bit more when we do the paper attempting techniques at the end. But moving on with the other topics, US and Russia. एक कॉमन विजडम होता है करंट अफेयर्स के लिए, स्पेशली इस साल वाले एग्जाम के लिए, कि यूजुअली 2 महीने पहले या 1.5 महीना पहले आपका जो है पेपर लॉक हो जाता है. While that may or may not be true, US and Russia, and again Russia in the context of Ukraine, is a big enough scale of an issue जो कि बहुत rarely होता है in modern history. So इसके लिए बहुत ज़रूरी है आप समझ सकें historical context क्या है, current state of affairs क्या है, what are the different parties that are involved, different parties के different interests कौन से हैं, and again, what things are going to be in the future. Afghanistan and the US and China, the democracy summit that happened last year, Nakba, for the people who don't know what Nakba is, I would really suggest, and वो लोग अगले साल अगले महीने paper दे रहे हैं, you guys Google this, understand what it is, understand its significance. You have to cover democracy in the US. This is particularly in reference to what happened in January of 2021 with the Capitol riots when supporters of former President Trump attacked the Capitol Hill building, and how that has impacted democracy, not just in the United States, but also the position of the United States as the leader of democracy on the global stage. We're going to look at India and China in particular, not just in the context of what happened in the Ladakh region, but also in the context of military, the context of economy, the context of a regional power race and a global power race as well, where perhaps India is being used as an ally or as a partner or as a pawn by other Western powers to counterbalance China's power in the region. B3W और BRI का आपको distinction करना ज़रूरी है because again यहाँ पे BRI का एक alternate option introduce किया गया हुआ था with B3W and the G7 summit by Western countries to give developing countries an option of where to get infrastructure money, and then lastly world energy dependence. The reason why these topics are so broad here is because we don't know कि किस तरीके से examiner आपको ये topics देगा. If we give them in one particular angle, the examiner is smart enough कि वो एक बिल्कुल ही niche angle से उस चीज़ को पकड़ ले. But if you have an understanding कि topic के अंदर main historical elements क्या आते हैं, main players कौन से हैं, interests कौन से हैं, and current state of affairs कौन सा है, so you can in that moment tackle it from multiple dimensions and you can give a breadth of knowledge that the examiner will possibly be impressed with. Once you're covering all of that, you're probably meeting the minimum standard. Again, examiner is very fickle. आपको exactly पता नहीं होता कि examiner कौन सी चीज अच्छी लगेगी, कौन सी अच्छी नहीं लगेगी. But so long as you cover multiple dimensions and again back that up with facts, figures, graphs, diagrams, and maps. Again, a bit of detail. हम लोग थोड़ा सा जाएंगे question answer attempting techniques में इसके अंदर. The examiner doesn't have any reason to fail you in that question or fail you in that essay and is more likely to give you enough marks so that you can score in the 50s and 60s. जो कि जिन लोगों ने एग्जाम दिया है या जिनका थोड़ी नजर है इस पे उनको अंदाजा होगा कंपलसरी सब्जेक्ट्स में और स्पेशली करंट अफेयर्स पाक अफेयर्स में गेटिंग 60s इज बहुत अच्छे मार्क्स होते हैं उनके लिए बहुत ज़्यादा मेहनत करनी पड़ती है. Now I think Amir will continue on with a bit of पाक अफेयर topics.
Thank you, Sami. I just wanted to focus on the expected Pakistan affairs topics for this year, and I'll give you a little summary of what I think could be discussed in those issues. अब आपके पास सबसे पहले तो आ जाता है Indo-Pak and Kashmir issue. Now, a lot of individuals will say, well, August 5th, 2019 was roughly 3 years ago. Why should we focus on it now? Well, there are developments that are taking place, aren't there? There is a Citizen Amendment Act that took place. There is the NRC. There is what is called love jihad, where Hindus aren't allowed to marry Muslims, and if they are being forcefully converted in Kashmir. आपका जो domicile law है, they have issued over 1 million domiciles that allow non-Kashmiris from Jammu and Kashmir to buy land and also take part in their public service examinations, which is very important to us. डोमिसाइल है नहीं लेकिन वहाँ से वो इम्तिहान दे रहे हैं. उसके अलावा इसकी वजह से जो हमारी एक डिप्लोमेटिक स्ट्रगल रही है UNGA पे हो गया, हमने जो OIC forums पे डिस्कशन किया है to raise the Kashmir cause, especially in the last year at the OIC Foreign Ministers Conference, at the OIC Summit that was held, I believe, in Riyadh, at the UNGA where we met Anthony Blinken. This was, I think, in 2020. And how we have met with a lot of leaders like the President of Republic of Chechnya, Putin, and Xi Jinping, who has affirmed his support to us for the Kashmir issue, where he said that the people's rights should prevail in accordance with the UNSC Resolution 51, 55, 47, 91, and 122. So many resolutions, yet India chooses to violate international law, bilateral law, Shimla Agreement, Clause 1, Subclause 2, and Article 370, which is a part of its own constitution. I mean, a country is violating its own law. But then again, that's a debate for another day. After that, we have the presidential versus parliamentary debate in Pakistan. ये debate तो हम बहुत वक्त से सुनते हुए आ रहे हैं. पाकिस्तान presidential हो या parliamentary हो, parliamentary democracy में बहुत ज़्यादा stakeholders हो जाते हैं. उनमें जो हमारे elected individuals होते हैं, perhaps they are not suited for the ministries they are given or the portfolios. Presidential में कहा जाता है कि जी president होगा तो technocratic appointments होंगी. They will know the job that they are. They will know about the portfolio that they are being given. Sure, parliamentary democracy वाले कहते हैं all right, लेकिन public representation सिर्फ parliamentary democracy में ही होती है. वही public representatives जिनको हम elect करते हैं उनको ही portfolios दिए जाते हैं. So they are our voice inside the National Assembly. तो ये presidential versus parliamentary system को भी आपको discuss करना होगा. उसके बाद आपका आ जाता है the Afghanistan issue, the Afghanistan fiasco, the Afghanistan conundrum. You can add any adjective. Afghanistan is going through a humanitarian crisis, a social crisis, a political crisis, all of which has an impact on Pakistan. आपको बहुत बार कहा जा होगा कि जो पाकिस्तान और अफगानिस्तान का बॉर्डर है वो पोरस है. It's a fluid border. और वहाँ से जो issue होता है हमारे पास that if Afghanistan is not politically and socially stable, we have a huge influx of refugees coming to Pakistan to seek help, to seek a place where they do not have a war or perhaps as frequent terrorist attacks. And that is a burden on our economy to facilitate them. And we do. We are one of the largest we're one of the largest peacekeepers for refugees in the world. I mean, in South Asia, we are by far, but in the world as well. आपके पास अफगानिस्तान का आ गया. उसके बाद आपके पास आ जाता है climate change. Our ex-Prime Minister Imran Khan had the billion tree tsunami. Our climate change policies, such as installing a mangrove plants on the coast of Thatta and having more mangrove trees to avert perhaps a crisis where जो हमने land reclamation की है, वो because of the tidal waves is brought back to the shores. एक वो बड़ा issue है. और उसके साथ जो हमारा 10-year plan है to rid ourselves of coal and fossil fuel, inshallah, fingers crossed, वो हम कर पाएंगे. तो ये बहुत बड़ी पॉलिसीज हैं जो हमने की हैं और क्लाइमेट चेंज आ सकता है. उसके बाद आपका आ जाता है द बलूचिस्तान क्राइसिस. और उसके अंदर बलूचिस्तान क्राइसिस में पॉलिटिकल स्टेबिलिटी, सोशल स्टेबिलिटी and the rise of extremist radical anti-state groups such as the Balochistan Liberation Army, the BRA, the BFA, the BLA, all under the wing of certain non-state intelligence agencies that are sponsoring them, which was directly hit on in our national security policy that was given by our ex-national security advisor Moeed Yusuf. That could be a huge issue that could come inside the question, inside the paper. National integration and debate about creating new provinces. The question speaks for itself. How can we promote national integration? Is it through initiatives such as the single national curriculum, educational harmonization, to try to ensure that extremism and radicalism is reduced, to ensure that provincial discord turns into provincial coordination, to ensure that the Council of Common Interest and bodies such as that are bringing Pakistan together and are not just created and initiated for us to look on whenever we have to take a reactive approach, not a proactive approach. So that is one thing that could be asked. और उसके अलावा जो आपके सवाल आ जाते हैं, क्रिएशन ऑफ न्यू प्रोविंसेस, साउथ पंजाब कहा जाता है, कराची कहा जाता है, गिलगित का जो हमने प्रोविजनल प्रोविंशियल स्टेटस दिया है टू कन्वर्ट इट इनटू a full-fledged province. लेकिन उससे फिर जो काउंटर आर्ग्यूमेंट आती है कि that if we convert Gilgit into a full-fledged province, aren't we giving up our cause on Kashmir? Because Gilgit is supposedly a part of the greater Kashmir pre-47. And if we are amalgamating it within our country, that would give up the Kashmiri cause. But then वहाँ पे counter argument ये आती है that the Gilgit, that the people from Gilgit are willing to join Pakistan as a province, while the people from Jammu and Kashmir have resisted that oppressive and suppressive rule of the Indians, especially the BJP post-2014. उसके बाद पाकिस्तान अफेयर्स का जो एक different dynamic है वो है Pak history. Now, I wasn't a huge fan of Pak history. I did not take Indo-Pak history, so this was a struggle for me. But there are certain topics that you can focus on, which could ensure that वो जो एक आधा सवाल आ जाता है हर साल Pak history का, you can target those and perhaps have an answer created on that question, which could help you in the exam. तो उसमें आ जाता है post 1857 जो events हुए थे, उसमें आपके सर सैयद अहमद खान आ जाते हैं, पार्टीशन ऑफ बंगाल आ जाता है, आपका जो कांग्रेस मिनिस्ट्रीज आ जाती हैं, आपका वो जो 1940 से 1947 था स्ट्रिंग ऑफ मेजर कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल पॉलिटिकल इलेक्टोरल इवेंट्स हुए थे, 3 जून प्लान, कैबिनेट मिशन प्लान, उन सब पर आपने कॉन्सेंट्रेट करना है. उसके अलावा अगर इफ यू आर वेरी इंटरेस्टेड एंड यू जस्ट वांट टू कवर ऑल योर ट्रैक्स, just go towards the downfall of Mughal Empire as well. Just give it a read. It's going to cover up anything that you might miss from pre-1857. उसके बाद आपका शाह वलीउल्लाह आ जाता है. Do go over Shah Waliullah. He's an Islamic reformer. Maybe an MCQ comes on him. Or I have learned the hard way that MCQs can either make or break your paper. MCQs के अंदर it's the only objective part of the exam, and the MCQs are getting tougher by the year. So if you focus on the MCQs and perhaps say you have a bang average theory section and you have an 18 in the MCQs, it can push you up to a mid to a late 50, which is great for Pakistan affairs. उसके अलावा आपका जो post 1947 के events हैं उसमें तो political science वाले जो students होंगे वो भी relate कर पाएंगे. आपका constitution making process of 1956, 62 and 73 जो constitution जो हमारी create होनी थी उसमें जो delay आया था, what were the reasons for the delay, उस पर आपको concentrate करना है. और major legal cases in Pakistan's history जो आ जाते हैं उसमें आपका डॉसो केस आ जाता है, मौलवी तमीजुद्दीन केस आ जाता है, उनको भी आप देख लें, उन पे एक आध MCQ आ जाता है, कभी कभार तो सवाल भी आ जाता है. The examiner is a very unique man. The examiner does not care what we are prepared for. He only cares about what he likes and what he wishes to ask you guys. So these are the expected topics that I believe may come in the exam for Pakistan Affairs. And I will switch it over to Sami so that we can start the Q&A session and answer your questions, hopefully.
Thank you so much, Amir. So everyone, the topics that we've mentioned for current affairs and Pak affairs, when we just mention them one after another, so they may seem a bit overwhelming. जिनका एग्जाम अगले महीने है, there is an expectation that they will know about most of these, if not all of these already. कुछ डेप्थ में कवर किए होंगे, कुछ इतने नहीं किए होंगे, so it's not that overwhelming. For the people that are trying or planning to apply next year, there's plenty of time for you guys to cover all of these. For example, for current affairs mein over the last year, the major incidents that have happened, that have occurred, those will roughly be covered in the exam. So for current affairs exam next year, most of the incidents, or roughly I would say half of the incidents of significance, may perhaps have not even occurred yet. So do not take that that seriously. This is something that is a very, very gradual process for Pakistan affairs as well. For those of you who have given the exam or who have in particular looked at the past papers, you guys will understand that the exam is split into roughly two portions. One part, which is roughly 30-40% or supposed to be 30-40%, is Pakistan history, which again, as Amir mentioned, covers the Mughal era, it covers the 1857 events, it covers post-1947 events. It's split between these three. But recently, उसमें से इतने ज़्यादा सवाल आ नहीं रहे for the people that have seen the exam for last year. They will notice that only one question came from history in particular, that was about Muslim reformers in the subcontinent. And then most of the other issues were related to Pakistan-specific issues. Now, again, those questions have similar themes over the years. So once you look at the past papers, once you give it its due time, once you look at history properly in a chronological order and all the issues as well, as Amir said, constitution is something that you need to look into. चीज़ें आराम आराम से क्लियर होते होने और शुरू हो जाएंगी. This is not a class. This is just to give you an idea of what are the sort of things you're supposed to cover and how you're supposed to cover them. Now, I think हमने बहुत ज़्यादा time जो है consecutively बात कर ली है on these specific issues. So now we'll open the floor for you guys. If you have any questions relating to current affairs or Pak affairs in particular, or even generally regarding CSS, regarding other subjects, please feel free. Just request that we make you a speaker and we'll give it a shot. Mariam has had her hand up for a while. So Mariam, if you'd like to ask your question now. Okay, give me a second. Sikandar, I think you have speaker rights as well. So if Mariam is not asking, you can go ahead. I think सब लोगों ने बहुत ज़्यादा सुन लिया है. Nurulain.
Assalamu alaikum.
If you're on, yeah. Walaikum assalam.
Walaikum assalam.
First of all, I'm going to give my attempt in 2024, and I have started my CSS preparation, and I'm currently in my 6th semester in university. So the only question I have is that how can a student like me, who's in university, how can he or she maximize his or her like CSS preparation during university. I know a lot of people say that you should start after your degree, but since I'm like such a person who hasn't ever like read newspaper or like had like I don't know how to do critical analysis and stuff. So I've like kind of started my CSS preparation, but if there's any tips that you could give me, I'd like be very grateful to you. And that's my question.
So thank you, Noordulan. देखिए, you're in your sixth semester. If you're feeling like you're behind the trend या आपने अभी तक न्यूज़पेपर नहीं पढ़ा है, करंट अफेयर्स फॉलो नहीं करा है, that is not a problem. बहुत ज़्यादा वेरिएशन आता है. Multiple people from different backgrounds give the exam. Some people have a very strong grip on certain subjects, on certain ways of attempting the exam, and other people don't. Some people have excellent critical analysis, and other people don't. So if you haven't read the newspaper with any regularity till now, that's not really an issue. If you're in your sixth semester, you have roughly what around 2 years, 2.5 years even, because you'll be going for the 2024 attempt. So there's plenty of time जिसमें आप अपने आप को up to scratch लेके आ जाएं. Right now, what you should be doing is don't put any pressure on yourself. Don't think about subject selection in itself. Don't go too far into it. Focus on your studies and university for the most part. But I would suggest start reading. Now, that can be in the form of reading newspaper on a daily basis or once every other day, or even reading any other books that you're interested in. Because I'm a firm believer in this, and I think Amir would agree as well, that when you read and when you read from multiple sources, when you read different types of texts, that gives you not only a good way of presenting your argument in multiple dimensions, but it also improves other things in the exam that will be beneficial to you. It helps you with your vocabulary, helps you with your argumentation, and it helps you with facts and figures as well. So for example, newspapers in particular, अगर आप notes नहीं बना रहे उसमें से, and you're just reading it so that you know what's going on, I can guarantee you once you do that maybe like 3 or 4 times a week, and you do that for a few months, आप किसी के साथ discussion कर रहे होंगे, you'll be able to attach points that you read, एक point जो कि इस time पे पढ़ा था, एक point जो इस time पे पढ़ा था, and you'll be able to make a coherent argument. And that argumentation is going to be very beneficial for you in your CSS exam, not just in current affairs and park affairs, but in other subjects as well, particularly your essay exam. So right now, don't stress it. बहुत ज़्यादा focus नहीं करना है इस पे. Just read for a bit, and then once you're closer to your graduation, you can think of a better plan or better strategy for yourself. Right now, it's completely fine. Actually, it's recommended not having a particular plan for this. At least that's my opinion. If Amir would like to disagree, he definitely can. But yeah, I hope that answers your question.
No disagreements at all.
So now we have some raise.
Okay, thank you so much for answering my question.
No worries.
Assalamualaikum.
Some raise. वालेकुम अस्सलाम.
First of all, thank you very much for sharing your knowledge. आप बहुत अच्छा काम कर रहे हैं हेल्प करके स्टूडेंट्स की. सो मेरे 2 क्वेश्चंस हैं. सबसे पहले तो ये कि मुझे बताइएगा काइंडली कि जो करंट अफेयर्स का पेपर है उसके एमसीक्यूज को कैसे तैयार किया जाए, क्योंकि वो अफेयर्स जो चल रहे हैं पिछले 1 साल में जो हुआ है, तो उसका कोई सोर्स जहाँ से मैं कर सकूँ. और दूसरा मैंने आपसे पूछा था कि डिफरेंस अगर क्वेश्चन पूछा जाता है कि क्रिटिकली एवेलुएट और एक क्वेश्चन पूछा जाता है कि एलेबोरेट या और डिस्कस, तो इन दोनों में क्या डिफरेंस होगा, तो इसका थोड़ा सा आप मुझे बता दें. थैंक यू वेरी मच.
Thank you for the question. जो current affairs की MCQs होते हैं, they are perhaps the toughest MCQs to find because उसका सबसे बड़ा issue ये होता है कि we don't have any past papers to look at to access those current affairs. अब मैं आपको अपना personal experience बताता हूँ. When I went back after giving the current affairs paper, I realized I had a 16. And the reason why I had a good score in those current affairs papers was because I read Dawn every day. Or Dawn, I think last year an MCQ came on that elephant. I don't even remember the name anymore. Us pe aaya tha, so I knew the name and where it was meant to go from here. So personally speaking, on the internet there are a lot of pages who do post 10 MCQs a day or maybe 10 MCQs a week. Have a look at those as well. Read the Dawn newspaper, or if you haven't read it, go over the last 2 to 3 months of the major headlines from dawn.com, which is a mobile app, and that should give you a gist of what sort of MCQs can come. Focus on the major affairs that have taken place over the last year and a half. उनकी dates याद करें. For example, हमारा vote of no confidence कब motion हुआ था? When did the voting on the vote of no confidence take place, which are two different dates? और उसके अलावा, when did the US actually withdraw from Afghanistan? Or when did the US presidential election take place? Or when did Russia invade Ukraine? I don't want to use the word invade actually. Russia says that we went there to help the people of Ukraine, while the US says no, they invaded. So let's see how the examiner writes up that question. But that's for the MCQs. And as far as critical analysis is concerned, critical analysis और description में फ़र्क ये होता है कि आपने critical analysis में उसकी applicability और उसकी relevance to modern day issues बतानी होती है. उसके अंदर आपने उसका multi-faceted approach बताना होता है. आपने उसका multi-faceted impact बताना होता है. Description में आपने सिर्फ उसको describe करना. 18th Amendment ये थी. Critical analysis of 18th Amendment, how is it impacting center-province relationship? How is it impacting our response to emergencies? How can we ensure that we can improve our center-provincial relationship going forward whilst keeping in mind the sanctity of the 18th Amendment that was passed? ये होता है फर्क critical analysis और description में, and I've already given you the few tips that I do have for current affairs MCQs. I hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you.
No worries at all.